Well, first, welcome everybody here tonight. We had this conversation at the board level, administrative team, that as soon as we have a drug testing policy, we need to make sure that we not only institute this, vote on it, have it done for our youngsters, but we need to communicate this with the public, and that's what we're here tonight. Just so you know, if you had a friend that wasn't able to make it, or a family member, or a youngster that you would like to show this to, it is being filmed. This will be online on our website. So if you have anyone that couldn't make it tonight, or if you have to leave early, just understand that that's available 24/7 at your convenience. So let them know that. I first want to thank all of our board members, administrative team, committee members that are here tonight. We had a couple different committees that we're going to talk about here. When we talk about history, we want to make sure that we thank them because tirelessly we had several meetings when we had this discussion before we came up with a finished product. So we want to thank all of those folks that are not only here tonight but couldn't make it in attendance and participated along the way. We want to give you a little brief history on what transpired and how this came about. This actually started, and it states up here it started a couple years ago. It actually started the first round of strategic plan about 6.5 years ago. My first year here in Canfield, we had a strategic planning initiative, and we set goals for ourselves. We set the vision statement, we set the goals, and what our core values are, core beliefs are here in Canfield. And the one topic that kept resonating during that session was safety and security of our youth and staff, along with visitors in the district. Back then, if you remember, you were able to walk into buildings without being buzzed in. You weren't on camera no matter where you went. We didn't have ALICE training in our new lockdown procedure. We only had one SRO in the district. We weren't involved with local entities. We didn't have a whole lot of conversation with city and township. We didn't have a lot of dialogue with safety forces. All of that was mentioned at that initial strategic plan. So we had a lot of debate and how we were going to institute and implement a lot of different things to help our district. Then we had another strategic planning initiative 5 years later. So this started a couple years ago, and we needed to develop a plan that includes a prevention and intervention of substance abuse K through 12. And this was supposed to be enacted by January 18. Now understand, the finished product didn't happen at January 18, but we have several items that we implemented prior to January 18. We believe not only, and I know the meeting tonight is focusing on drug testing, but we believe emotional state of youngsters, their mind needs to be taken care of, and how can we, as a school system, help with this? So we've been involved with early warning system. If we had youngsters who weren't coming to school or tardy often, we now have an early warning system. This warning system, along with our trauma teams that are currently have been implemented at the middle school and high school levels, are addressing youngsters with their parents, with their families. So understand, all of this is part of that strategic planning committee. These teams that were formulated are now at the middle school and high school, are now at the elementary level. So if you have youngsters who are having some difficulties coming to school late, showing some emotional issues, those are now implemented at our elementary building. All of this, DARE, Girls Circle, Men of Honor, Life After CHS this past year, again, all a part of the plan to keep our youth safe. That's the main goal here. During these sessions, there's a lot of conversation that we already talked about, but if we can get this moving, there we go. We had a subcommittee from that strategic plan, and that was a Drug and Alcohol Awareness Committee. This subcommittee recommended to the board that we implement drug testing for youth. And this subcommittee came up with many different recommendations and conversations, and I want to highlight a few of those for you right now. First off, define the policy, what it states, and it's going to end up in the lap of our Board of Education, obviously, because any policy that's implemented, that we as an administrative team has to implement, we have to make sure that we follow what the policy reads. And the one piece to this was the committee wanted to have something that was non-punitive. And you're going to hear about a self-referral piece. So youngsters, up until the moment that they offer a sample to be tested, they have a self-referral. At that moment, it's non-punitive. We will then implement an intervention program, get them help that they're asking for, and there's no discipline handed out at that point whatsoever. That conversation is confidential. No one knows about it. You're going to hear about this as we move forward. The other piece was a K-12 opt-in. So if you have a youngster in Canfield that is not a student athlete, that is not a marching band member, or not a student driver, and you would like to opt in for random testing, you have that right as a parent. You can opt in. That test, your youngster will be placed in that random pool, and if your youngster is drawn, then at that moment, On Demand, which is the firm that we're using, will then test your youngster, and that conversation is only between them and you as a family. No one else. We don't need to know about it. We don't want to know about it. All we need to know is that the family understands what's going on in the youngster's life, and you need to get them some help. So those two pieces right there, the opt-in and the self-referral, came from definitely the committee, and the Board of Education followed through with it. So these are the areas that we talked about just now. We're going to move forward, and what's nice about this, we had a complete team here. And we had conversations going on, and the entire administrative team got together and make sure that we understand it together, because this is K-12. This is a topic that just isn't high school. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Maroney, and he's going to take care of the next slide for us. He's going to talk about the drugs that we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be able to notify those for you. So, Mr. Maroney.
Good evening, everyone. What we're looking at testing, or what we can test for, are drugs that are listed under U.S. code, which an individual may not sell, offer to sell, possess, give, exchange, use, distribute, or purchase under state or federal law. And the list of them is up here, including THC, which is the main drug in marijuana, cocaine, alcohol, amphetamines, which are stimulants, methamphetamines, which are also stimulants, opiates, PCP, ecstasy, heroin, barbiturates, which are depressants, benzodiazepine, which is also used for anxiety, panic, seizures, and insomnia, drugs like Xanax and Valium, methadone, propoxyphene, which is used for mild to moderate pain, oxycodone, which is used for moderate to severe pain, and nicotine, which is the stimulant found in tobacco. So these are the things that we can test for. And when you give a sample, these are things that will come up in the sample. If they are present, they will show on the sample.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney. There's 4 bullet points that I want to mention to you that I didn't at first, and it's the first page of the policy. So if you have the policy, I'll direct you to there. 4 bullet points, very important, that kept resonating in our conversations. 1, provide for the health and safety of students. 2, undermine peer pressure. That's a piece that you're going to hear here, and I can tell you some personal stories when it comes to that. Peer pressure is evident. There's no doubt about it. It's in our lives. It's in our youngsters' lives. And what's big with this is we will arm our youngsters with not only knowledge, but a reason why not to use with their peers. Secondly, encourage treatment for those who use. We want to help. We want to help our youth. That's the bottom line here. Obviously there's discipline that can possibly be handed out with multiple offenses, but we need to help our kids out. And the last one is to prevent the impact of drug use has on the brain, allowing students to achieve to their full potential. Those are our mission statements that are embedded right into the policy. We're going to move forward now, and we're going to call up on demand. We have a couple representatives here tonight that they are going to be able to communicate with you not only the confidentiality piece, but also the process, because they've been doing this for a while, and we're very confident in that. So we have Megan Wine and Ruth Bodish here tonight. So here you go, Ruth.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us out here tonight. As you mentioned, my name is Ruth, and I'm with On Demand Drug Testing. We service not only area schools in the Tri-County area, but we also service about 900 different companies across the country. The reason I'm mentioning that to you is because I want to stress to you that we understand the importance of confidentiality. So when we come out to a school to do these types of drug screens, there are protocols that have been put into place to ensure that everyone's confidence is going to be kept. So not only the selection of randoms, for example, what would happen is we would get a list of the students' names that is then given to an individual of our employee. We associate a number to that student. So let's say there's 100, we do 1 through 100. We no longer have a need for the names at that point because we're going to use a computer-generated random selection pool that's going to pull out different numbers. Once those numbers have been generated, we then reassociate the name, and then we contact the only individuals we're allowed to speak to, which is a high school principal, designated official, or of course the superintendent. And that's it. No one else is going to get privy to that information. In addition to the confidentiality of the selection process, we're also going to ensure confidentiality of the actual specimen collection. So whenever we have an individual, a student that comes up for a drug screen, we are going to be taking them one at a time into the stall. They are going to be put in there by themselves. Megan's going to talk a little bit more about that process here in just a moment. And then also to further ensure confidentiality, if any of your students are currently on a prescription medication that falls into one of those categories that we just discussed, we have an MRO process in effect. And what that stands for is a medical review officer. This is a physician, licensed physician that works for On Demand. We actually have 2 on staff. They will contact to verify the prescription. If the prescription is verifiable, then that is a negative, and no one has to know, no one is privy to any information that is protected by HIPAA. So all of these different types of protocols have been put into place to ensure the confidentiality of your student specimen, and the random selection process. So now I'm going to hand it over to Megan to talk a little bit about the collection process.
Good evening. Again, my name is Megan Wine. I am the sales director for On-Demand Drug Testing, but I've also had the privilege of working with several different school districts in the Tri-County area. Basically, when we go for student drug testing, what we do is the student will be notified to report to the collection site, and based upon a recent assessment of the facilities, we have chosen the gymnasium. Obviously, there's going to be a female restroom and a male restroom, and within the restroom, there's going to be a female collector for all females and a male for all males. The collection sites will be chosen based upon adequate bathroom facilities and the ability to limit access to all persons except authorized monitors and students being tested. Again, inside the restroom is only the student as well as the actual certified collector from On Demand. Only pants, shorts, t-shirts, or dresses may be worn in the collection area. While we focus on this, I know you're saying t-shirts, pants. What we do not want in the restrooms is any outerwear, jackets, hoodies, hats, book bags, purses, cell phones. Everything is generally left outside of the restroom. That way they're going in, there's no ability for them to bring in any type of, adulterated specimen or anything outside for, to try and tamper their specimen. Students will be asked to urinate directly into a collection cup given to them, obviously by myself. When a student comes in, they're going to go to an administration table, they're going to sign in, they're going to have a chain of custody specifically, they're going to sign off on, and they're going to have their own collection cup. And I have a couple cups tonight if you guys would like to see them. They're an instant cup. The entire drug screen process itself lasts between 2 to 3 minutes. They're going to go inside the SOL, and they're going to provide the specimen. Once they provide the specimen, they are going to give it back to the collector, and the actual collector can read the specimen and the test instantaneously. And as you can see, the test that I have up here, you can just have, there's a strip on the side, and we will be notified whether or not the drug test itself is a negative or a non-negative. If the actual test itself comes up as a non-negative, we do have a standard procedure protocol that we do follow. We will send any non-negatives to a certified laboratory for confirmation. We will split the specimen. We will actually fill out an additional piece of chain of custody. We will send it to our certified laboratory, and once it's there, it will be analyzed, and we will receive a result directly at our office. And Ruth kind of touched base a little bit on the MRO process. We do have a physician. If we have a non-negative, if you're, say, for example, your child is on an amphetamine, our MRO will get that result, and they will contact you within 24 hours of receiving that result. Again, it's all confidential. Obviously, school officials do not know any non-negatives until we have the opportunity to contact you to verify that prescription. Once we verify the prescription, we can actually report that and release that to the student official, or excuse me, designated school official as a negative. Okay? So it says students who are absent when scheduled or otherwise unable to provide an acceptable sample when scheduled are not eligible to participate in athletics or park at school until a retest can be scheduled and an acceptable sample is obtained. On the day of collection, there's ample enough time for the student to provide a specimen. When we come on site, as soon as they sit down in the gymnasium, they're going to be offered plenty of water. And there's the process itself, it's pretty smooth. The process itself, there's not very frequent. We do have a student who's not able to provide a specimen. If that case does happen, I've worked with several different schools where, I had a girl who had a kidney problem. It's perfectly fine. Obviously in that case, we will actually, seek additional medical documentation to provide a valid reason as to why that student cannot provide. But otherwise, plenty of water. Usually standard protocol is 2 hours to provide a specimen. So, okay?
I didn't mention this before, but if you have a question as we move forward, there's no cards available. We're going to ask personnel to walk through and collect those after we're done with the presentation, and we'll address any questions that you might have for us at that time. So we're going to try to move through this. There's one piece that I don't believe I touched on, and that was nicotine. Nicotine is also going to be tested. Again, for a 50-cent piece, nicotine is going to be tested. Now, why are we doing that? It's across the nation. When 60 Minutes does a report, when national media, when local media talk about e-cigarettes and the usage rate in our teens, in our preteens today, there's a problem. Now, we're not looking to discipline whatsoever. That nicotine test, if there is a non-negative that pops up, we don't need to know. I don't want to know. But as a parent, I would want to know. So that conversation between facility and the parents will happen. Now, what you do with that information is up to you. If you allow your youngster to use e-cigarettes or use nicotine, that's on you as a family. I'm not looking to raise your youngster there. But at least you'll have the information and understand what's going on in your youngster's life. Because I know a lot of times things happen, especially with a teenager, and you might not know what's going on. So at least you'll have that information and be able to have that conversation with them. We're going to ask Mr. Moldovan to come forward now, and it's reality. We have to understand what we're going to do if there are policy violations.
Thank you. I'm Mr. Moldovan, the high school principal, and as you can see, there are some options, not options, but some realities as far as policy violations are concerned. This is what we would consider a policy violation. The first two are pretty standard. If a student would refuse to report to collection site after they're notified, or they refuse to submit a sample for testing, we would consider that a policy violation. Number three, any tampering with a sample for testing or attempting to subvert the collection or the identification process. you probably read stories about people being tested, and they have various ways and means that they try to get around that. The lab checks every sample for anything that's been adulterated, such as additives that you drink or anything else to add to the urine to change the sample. People are very, very resourceful these days with going online and looking at how to get around these tests. Number 4, obviously a confirmed positive result for a banned substance would be a policy violation. Anybody who would aid or abet another student in violating the policy, we would consider that a policy violation. The refusal to submit to a retest when required following an inconclusive, adulterated, or a suspect result would be considered a violation of the policy. And the failure of the student and or the student's parent guardian to sign the testing consent forms and return them to the designated official prior to the testing. Those would all be considered policy violations. What happens if there's a result of a positive test? Again, parents will be notified of the results of any positive urine drug test results directly from the drug testing company. The drug company will then contact the district's building administrator. The principal shall contact the parent guardian and inform the parent guardian of their right to meeting with the principal to explain the student's rights under this policy. The parents or guardian must contact the principal within 48 hours, excluding weekends, following the receipt of said notice. The student and his or her parent guardian may at their own expense elect to have a portion of the original sample retested by an independent certified laboratory of their choice. So again, that would be your right to do that. The results of the test shall not become part of the student's permanent record, but any documentation supporting a test based on reasonable suspicion shall be maintained in the student's record in school. I get this all the time from parents over the years. What is a permanent record? Will this be on my permanent record? Understand the only thing that the school would release to a college, let's say, would be a transcript. And a transcript does not have the discipline of the student. The only thing the transcript has on it are grades and attendance. That's the only thing that is legally on a transcript, and that's really the only thing that is released. But we get asked that question quite a bit. Students with discipline violations, those are not on the permanent record that is released to anybody. The school keeps it in our own files here. And the last bullet point there, test results will not be reported to law enforcement authorities, and test information will not be released to law enforcement or other parties except in response to a lawfully executed subpoena. So law enforcement can ask us with a subpoena, and then we, of course, by law, we would be forced to divulge that information. Okay?
Okay, we're going to have the individual who's going to be in charge and be able to involve himself in not only athletics but marching band, and that's Mr. Cochran, our athletic director.
Good evening. First offense of a positive test, the student will be denied privileges of qualifying activity for 20% of the next contest scheduled for the season. During the suspension, the student will not be present at the regularly scheduled competitive contests and or events, including all postseason tournaments and games. The student shall be required to have professional assessment within 7 days of notification of the violation. The student must set an appointment with chemical dependency counselors and must participate in an assessment and rehabilitation program. Students may participate in scheduled practice sessions during the denial of participation period with a medical release. Second offense, the student will be denied participation for 1 calendar year from the infraction. The student must participate in and complete a professional education program to correct abuse problem before reinstatement to qualifying activities. When the educational program is completed, he or she may then return to practice, return return a practice player band member only until his or her imposed suspension is complete. Any cost of such program incurred is the responsibility of the parent. The student shall forfeit, third offense, the student shall forfeit the remaining eligibility to participate in all Canfield athletic programs or marching band for the remainder of their high school career.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Shields to come up because he's going to be very much involved with student drivers with a positive test.
Good evening. I'm going to share the information about first, second, and third offense with student drivers. First offense, basically, it says this: your student will be denied the privilege to drive to our school until a participation in an assessment and follow-up program are completed at your expense, not at our expense. Once that is completed, they must submit a sample at the next random testing, and if their sample comes back negative, then we will reissue them a parking pass, not at another cost for the parking pass. You pay for the parking pass one time, and then that will cover if they fall under one of the offenses. Second offense, they will be banned from parking at the high school for the remainder of that school year, and they must continue or start another assessment and follow-up program. And we need proof of that was completed prior to them issuing them a parking pass potentially the next year. And then third offense, they will be banned from parking at the high school for the remainder of their high school career. The other piece that I am actively involved in is the nicotine piece. And basically, like Mr. Jordan mentioned, it is a non-punitive situation. It is, we want you to know. And however we can help you to help them is what we want to do. Again, the follow-up programs would be at your expense. We do offer something here that if you are interested, we can talk about it if you happen to need something like this, but I did want to point that out. The key here is if you want to refer to page 10 and 11 in your book, there's a highlighted point there on page 10 that I want to verify and make sure that this is the drug testing policy that's non-punitive. If your son or daughter is at school in possession of any of these things, they will be in violation of the athletic code of conduct as well as the student code of conduct. So this is just the drug testing piece that's non-punitive. There is also possession that happens during the school day that we wanted to make sure is apart from each other.
Okay, I'm going to have Mr. Rubin come forward and touch base on self-referrals and opt-in. Again, we talked about K through 12. So in essence, Mr. Rubin is going to have to make sure, Mr. Flood, make sure that we understand what's going on here, because I've heard from some parents. I have an 8th grade young man, and I want to make sure that we get him involved in the random testing. That is available. That is our opt-in. Now again, no discipline is handed out, but at least we're going to arm that youngster to be able to to deal with peer pressure and also have that conversation at home with a parent. So Mr. Rubin?
Thank you. Just to reiterate with Mr. Jordan, there is a one-time self-report or self-referral. A student may give a self-referral to right before they're about to get tested. It could be a coach, it could be a teacher, it could be an administrator, and it could also be the person that's administering that test. Obviously, it has to be right before the actual test occurs. There'll be some counseling, additional testing that are required, and they may be tested on a monthly basis if they do the self-report or self-referral. The opt-in program is the K through 12. So if any middle school parent is interested in having their student child into the opt-in program, let us know. We will provide that information for you. And again, it's random, and the only people that are going to know the results are going to be the parents. Everything else is kept in confidentiality. So.
Yes, we have the dates, and we don't mind posting them because we're at a point now where we're very confident, even if a youngster up to this point, up until last night, decided that they were going to, or maybe even a couple weeks now, to get themselves off, to remove themselves, we're very comfortable with posting a dates, and we're going to let you folks know tonight, post it on our website, and an all call is going to go out. I want you to understand something. With the self-referral, the youngsters are still going to be tested, and this is the reason why. And this was straight from On Demand, and this resonated with the committee. A youngster self-refers that, let's say that they did marijuana, and they're going to fall on the sword, let's say, and ask for help. We're still going to test them, and this is the reason why. They might say that they did marijuana, but God forbid, and this is happening at an unbelievable rate out there, that marijuana that they're buying on the streets laced with fentanyl. And they might think that they're smoking marijuana, but they're putting other into their system. So we're going to test them anyways, and we might find that that youngster has something else in their blood, something else in their system that they weren't aware of. As soon as we heard that, we're still testing. It's non-punitive for one time, but we want to make sure that we arm the parents and help the youngster with what they need help with. Also, we feel so deeply involved and focused and interested that the entire administrative team with central office not only toured the facility of On Demand, we were tested this week. And thank goodness I don't have to look for another administrator. But we were all tested, clean. That's how much we're committed to this. That's how much we're committed to this. We're behind it 100%. So the testing dates, August 7th, that's next week. And Mr. Cochran, along with Mr. Shields and Mr. Moldovan, are very focused on making sure that people are organized here, On Demand's ready to go, all hands on deck. That August 7th, next week, marching band, fall sports are going to kick it off. Also, football. We say football there at 3 o'clock because they do doubles. And they're looking to probably get off the field around 3:30, quarter to 4. We're going to start the freshmen at 3 o'clock, and then varsity will come in after that. So, marching band, the other fall sports are starting at noon. Football comes after. August 8th, the drivers at noon. We actually have forms here tonight to sign your youngster up. We are going to have the forms to sign up for a parking pass available on the 8th or the 7th for those that are not only drivers but student athletes or band members. We are going to get this started sooner than we have in the past. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This is our first year. We're going to have speed bumps, but we're ready to go. And we're going to get through this together. And again, the bottom line is student safety. We are going to have a walk-in service, and that is available if youngsters cannot come on the 7th or 8th. Now, they're going to have to do this on their own. If they want to participate in an athletic sport, marching band, or drive to school, they're going to have to go down to On Demand, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And that facility is actually adjacent right to the Quaker Steak and Lube in Austintown. If you drive down, I think it's Patriot, right? Patriot Boulevard, you'll think to go right. Be careful because that individual doesn't have to stop, the others do. As you drive down, Quaker Steak's on your right. If you look to the left, brand new facility, On Demand. Again, very impressive when we walked through the facility and toured it and went through the process. You have to have a student ID, and if you don't, you better make sure that you're accompanied by a parent or guardian. So again, feel free to share that with your youth, with the public. Next week, we kick it off. All right? So right now, again, I want to thank all of the people that were involved, starting with Board of Education members, committee members dating back a couple years now. If you have note cards, if you would, please offer those to the center, and we have some individuals coming through and have those available. as we move on, I know we had a couple stories. I talked to you about my daughter and being able to step forward if they are, when it comes to arming them with information on peer pressure. That's one piece that is truly something that I hold dear to my heart. Is this because there are problems with drugs in school? I think there's drugs across the nation. I think there's an issue with drugs across the nation. Can I say that we have youngsters in our schools today that could possibly be using? Yes. Do we have issues with usage in schools? These guys can attest. It's not like we're finding items on youngsters. It's not like we're noticing that there are deals going on. The staff is very in tune on what's happening in their classrooms. We rely on them from so many items. And what's nice about this, I'm just going to let you know another little story. I don't know if she's in the audience today, but I received an email from a youngster, and she said, Mr. Jordan, I got hooked on vaping. I'm a band member. I'm concerned. I need help. If this was something that we can come forward and do for our youth to talk about it, and we save a life from it, I don't have to say any more of that. But no, this is not because we feel that there are drug problems in our schools. Are they evident? I don't know. You tell me. You're the parents. Next one. Why not test everyone? Okay, so we talked to legal counsel on this, and we were definitely advised that this is something that we are not permitted to test blanketly everybody in the school. But I'm just going to walk you through it. There were over 560 drivers last year. There were over 570 student athletes and band members. We're thinking the number's around 200 that don't participate in any of that, freshmen and sophomores. Now, we feel that it is a physical piece to it. So you have to be physically fit when you participate in the band. And if you don't think this is true, put on that heavy gear that they were getting dressed today and measured, and try to march in 100-degree weather with 90% humidity. There's a physical piece to it. When you're driving to school, a vehicle, there's a physical piece that you better be sound, and also student athlete. I'll tell you another story. Why do we look at student athletes? Are we punishing them? Heavens no. When I was a coach years ago, I had a student athlete during a double session. I was a line coach on top of a 7-man sled. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we've been practicing for 6 hours. Yeah, you calculate that, how long we were practicing and what time we hit the field. God forbid we do that today. I'll tell you that. I'm on a blocking sled. Young man drops on his back, eyes roll to the back of his head. I'm slapping him, trying to get him back. I don't know. I'm a young kid. How do you address somebody that eyes are rolled in the back of the head? What happened? His physical makeup shut his system down. Why? He doped the night before. Yeah, there's a physical piece to it. Yeah, we're concerned about our youth. So qualifying activity, that's what we're focusing on here. What happens if a band member fails a second test? Do you give them a new class to replace the credit? We didn't say anything about taking them out of class. This has nothing to do with grades. We're talking about marching band. We're talking about marching. We're not talking about anything during the school day. We're not talking about anything about losing credit. Not at all here. Not at all. Why are all competitive extracurriculars not subject to policy? Again, physical piece. So let's say, for instance, we might want to bring forward speech and debate. Okay, nationally ranked speech and debate team. The physical piece to it is what the committee focused on. Now again, I'm going to highlight this for you. And I'm not saying this because we're wavering in any way. This is committee recommended, board adopted. Board policies are addressed quarterly. If we feel we need to address it down the road, we will. But right now, it was not only board policy for Canfield given to legal counsel, this is what was recommended again back to us. But again, if you're going to have a committee make recommendations to something, you do need to listen what those recommendations might be. Why did we not have this forum before you finalized the policy? Disappointed, but not surprised. Boy, we don't do a lot of that. So to say disappointed but not surprised, I'm surprised at that comment. Board policies are read twice. Board policies are available. We are very transparent. We not only had community members that were just layman community members on this committee, and to think that this was something that we just passed, and I told you right away, we've talked about this for years. We've actually, and I'll be honest, I was actually questioned, why we didn't have this last year? But it was talked about, we wanted to make sure that we make this available for conversation, we vet this, we look at other policies, and then we move forward with it. Again, board policies are living documents. We can always look back at it, but right now we're very confident in what we have. Oh, great. Okay. Ruth, you want the...
I'll take it. Okay, so we've got some really great questions, guys, and I'm happy to have an opportunity to address some of them. So the first one I'm going to go with is an individual who is taking several prescriptions, a student who's taking several prescriptions. How will you know these meds? Will he or she be benched before the drugs are identified and doctors are notified? The answer to that question is no. We are actually going to be able to provide a lab result to the school before any action is taken. And before that lab result will go to the school, we will contact the parents and verify those prescriptions. The classification of drugs that were recently put up there, whether it was amphetamines, methamphetamines, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, are all going to be considered pharmaceutical grade narcotics or controlled substances. Those substances are going to be able to be verified through that situation, through the MRO process that we discussed. Those prescriptions will not be given out to any other individual except for the authorized individuals through On Demand, the medical personnel. That is protected by HIPAA. If everything that comes up on, let's say you have a student and they're on maybe 3 different prescription medications. So we're going to have a prescription for amphetamines, a metabolite of methamphetamines, and then we're going to also have a benzodiazepine. Those 3 prescriptions, we're going to be able to verify that. We're going to ask for a printout from the pharmacy that fills those prescriptions. Pharmacies are well adequated to provide that information. It usually takes about 2 minutes for you to go down. They'll print it right off and give it to you. You would then provide that to us here at On Demand. We would then verify that the metabolite of that prescription matches the metabolite that was in the urine specimen. That's what an MRO does. They are a licensed physician that has extra schooling to verify that metabolites of drugs match up with pharmaceutical grades. So hopefully that will answer your question. As long as the prescriptions match what's in the drug screen, that is as a negative and no disciplinary action at that point. All right, so I think that one was good. Let me have that one back. All right, will the student know the initial result at the time of collection? The presenter indicated it's instantaneous. Technically, yes. We don't make it a note of saying, okay, you're negative for this, 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 and this. It's the whole process actually takes anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. And so if they are negative, we just move on. It's not going to be a huge discussion. Most of the time when we do the student drug testing, the kids are not overly concerned. I mean, they know if they're going to be positive or negative a lot of times. So they just kind of get the test and they want to get back to whatever sport they're playing or practice or whatever they're in the middle of. If there is a non-negative, so if one of those prescriptions or something else happens to pop up, then yes, the student will be notified because we have additional paperwork that will need to be completed at that time. So hopefully that'll answer that question. Another question is, if a female is menstruating, is there any issues? Thoughts about humility. This is why we use same gender collectors. This is not something that we are unfamiliar with. This does happen. And for the most part, it's something that's handled very quickly, very efficiently. Our female collectors are well in tuned on how to handle those situations, and we just kind of move through without a lot of conversation. So that, again, is why we have the same gender. To answer further questions that I think may arise, will it skew a result? The answer to that is no. No, it will not. How often will random testings take place? Right now we're looking at quarterly, but the way the policy was written is they are going to be able to change that if a need presents itself. So if we start raising 1 or 2% positives or 3 or 4% positives, those are actually, believe it or not, pretty high statistics for school drug testing. So at that moment we may want to encourage more frequent randoms, but that'll be, right now it's going to be quarterly from my understanding. Are they also testing for vaping chemicals? Not entirely certain what you mean by vaping chemicals. Right now, what we're looking at in chemicals for vapes are going to be either the liquid nicotine or the liquid marijuana, and yes, those both are going to be tested. All right, so who's coming up? Back to you. There you go.
Okay. Question about costs for the opt-in participants. Okay, if a youngster K through 12 that doesn't fall in the category of student athlete, marching band, student drivers, the opt-in cost is to the parents. That does fall back onto the parents. So the opt-in is back on the individuals who are asking for this. And I can talk about the costs as well, because that was brought up. So in the past, student drivers' cost for a parking pass was $10. We adopted at the board level to increase that to $20 for a parking pass. That will offset some of the costs. If you remember what I said earlier, over 560 drivers last year. So that will offset a large number. Are administrators, bus drivers, teachers, or any other faculty subject to random drug tests? Right now, our drivers are, whether they are a bus driver or a staff member who opts to drive their team to events. So they are, as I said before, administrators have already, not randomly, we all did it together at that point. What happens if a parent or student does not give consent? A student cannot give consent. The parent will give consent for the youngster to be tested. If they do not, they don't participate or receive a parking pass. It's a privilege to participate, extracurricular activity, or drive to school. Why are we not testing for anabolic steroids? The committee didn't even talk about anabolic steroids. They talked about the drugs that are currently taking the lives of youth today, or young adults today. They didn't mention that at all. But I do know this, that the Ohio High School Athletic Association has talked about this and have not, and I don't foresee them having this recommended to have their schools test for anabolic steroids. And to tell you the truth, we're not having any of those conversations that's a problem within our schools today at all. Why did the football players have advance notice of the individual first said August 2nd, now they changed it to August 7th testing. We just scheduled that test this week. So to say that any athlete, any driver, any student knew the testing date, that's false. We did this right with On Demand. Number one, we needed to know our schedules. We needed to know what's available. We needed to know when they were available to come out. No one knew. I will tell you this, as soon as it was adopted in July, Mr. Cochran and others had conversations with not only coaches, but booster members and said, it's coming, folks. It's coming, just so you know. So to say that people knew in advance that the testing date, impossible. We just publicized it today for the first time. Okay, here we go. And they're doing a job back here to consolidate, and we're trying to stay on time here, so we're doing the best we can. May anyone refer a student who is not his or her own child? Refer, opt in, saying you need to have custody of a youngster's rights in school. So if you don't have custodial rights, you don't have that opportunity to do that. So those individuals, so if it's a grandparent or if it's a blended family, only the custodial parent has that right. What is being done proactively to educate students of the hazards of substance abuse? Okay, like I talked about their program, we talked about PBIS, there's other programs that are going to be implemented next year in our elementary. There's also programs, early warning system, trauma teams that are having involvement in schools today. When I say trauma teams, there's a list of 10 items on a youngster's life, trauma in a youngster's life. I'm going to give you an example of trauma. When we think of trauma, we think of maybe an accident on 680 and you need assistance from medical personnel. If a youngster had to deal with a separation at home, a youngster had to deal with abuse in the house, if a youngster had to deal with drug and alcohol usage in a house, if a youngster had to deal with a parent incarcerated, this is all trauma in a youngster's life. We have teams that have been educated, and we are going to educate the entire staff on this opening day. We already have in-services scheduled for our staff, what to look for in a youngster's life. So we're going to try to be proactive to get involved in that youngster's life if they're willing to communicate, if the family's willing to participate, and we're getting training and how to work with youngsters. I'm truly amazed every day that I walk around and I know how well our staff knows our kids. Every day they amaze me. They know not only the youngster's name, they know what's going on at home, they know how to deal with them, they want to deal with them, they want to get involved. Our staff does an unbelievable job there. Can we do better? Most definitely. We can always grow. But I think we're doing a pretty decent job with that. Last two. Again, if you think of items that need to be questioned, I do a weekly update. In the summer, we don't do weekly updates, but feel free to email. Feel free to call. Feel free to let us know what those might be. If you need to have it confidential, have it confidential. Call my secretary, ask her the question. Don't give your name. Whatever you need out of it. But we're here for you, and we'll try to make sure we answer everything that you might have. Actual amount of each test. Okay. Not only the opt-in students, but every test. And we are very fortunate here. And we beat these gals up when it comes to the cost. So I appreciate that. $12 for the 12-panel test. I'm going to repeat that. $12 and then a 50-cent piece for nicotine. $12.50 for each test. I don't know if they're in the audience tonight, but I've heard from 5 districts across the Mahoning Valley that we're going to come tonight or send a representative because they're being charged a lot more. They're not getting the 12-panel test for the cost, and there are a lot of districts that are looking at our policy wanting to enact something very similar. So we're very fortunate of what that cost is. But again, what's the value of a life if we can help someone out? If they test positive, do you allow them to drive home from the test? Very good question. I'm going to be honest with you. We haven't talked about that. The answer to that right now is no. And we'll discuss that on what happens. But come August 7th or 8th, and they're tested positive, remember, we're not testing for alcohol. We're not testing for any of that. But right now, we're going to say a parent is going to be notified. But remember, we're not going to find out about the positive test initially. So that's going to be difficult to really manage. So we'll have some conversation as we move forward. We have not talked about that at all. So I'll be completely honest with you. Great question. Many of these questions have been brought up in our committees, and we vetted it, and we debated, and we talked about it. We didn't have 100% on every answer, But by the time it reached the board and the board were able to vote on it, we're ready to go. So right now, we're going to close. I'm going to stick around if you would like to come up and question individually. I'd be happy to do so. I value your opinion. We might disagree on something, but I definitely value it because you folks are the reason we're here, and that's to educate our youth. So thanks for coming, and we hope you have a safe summer.